Hello and welcome back to KXAN Live. Thanks for joining us here on our Facebook and our website as well as our app. We want to mention that we do have a new app that's on CTV programming, on Roku, on Fire Stick, and on Apple TV, wherever you get your streaming from. So you can find us there, download our app, KXAN Plus, and you can watch shows like this or even our newscasts and other weather segments on there. But today here on KXAN Live, we do have our SpaceX Space segment with our space expert, Eric Henriksen. Thanks for joining us, Eric. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It feels like a Monday, but it's not, so we're in the middle.
I'm definitely like in the middle of a big, intense, I have an investigation airing Thursday night, so I'm like in that edit, trying to put that story together. And so I'm kind of deep dive. So for me, it's like Thursday already.
Well, I wish it was my Thursday already.
Not in a good way. I'm trying to handle it all.
Focus mode, right?
Focus mode.
Well, this topic that we're gonna talk about is a topic we've talked about in the past because this has been going on for quite a while. We've had some astronauts stuck in space in the space station, but they are coming back. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the astronauts, everyone's been talking about these astronauts, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, who've been stuck in space since last June.
Wow.
They were supposed to do a few days up. They were riding the Boeing Starliner up to see if that spacecraft would work. And it got them there, but it didn't quite get them back. And as a result, they've been up there for June. So like, what's about 9 months?
Wow.
9 months here on the International Space Station awaiting their return. And then last night, the SpaceX's Dragon capsule picked them up. Undocked, there's a better word for that, dedocked, disembarked, there we go. And now it's going to return later today, which is pretty cool.
Later today, around what time do you think they'll
be
landing?
It is, the earliest they have it locked in is at 4:57 Central Time, so 5:57 Eastern Time, off the coast of Florida. They'll crash land in the ocean there, a splashdown. So not crash, but a splashdown in the ocean there, then they'll be picked up. So it's about 5:57 is the earliest they're anticipating. And that can change based on, weather, wind, stuff like that. But it looks like so far it looks pretty good. But we're early in the day.
Well, this was a long trip for them, longer than they expected. And I don't know if you caught that video, but there was someone coming out of the craft with an alien mask on. I bet they've had so much fun up there and are excited to be home. Yeah,
they seem to be, I bet they're going to be very excited. I know they were talking this morning, I was watching a press conference, and they were talking about ready to see their families because they were expecting like a week. I think Butch said his youngest daughter spent her first year in high school and he was supposed to be back for that and he's missed that. Mm-hmm. So they're very excited to be back with their families is what I'm hearing from their own mouths.
Yeah, as anyone else would be if they were stuck up there for 9 months. Tell me, when was their actual return to Earth date?
So it was June. It was middle of June. It was just a couple days. They were supposed to go up there, say, hey, look, we got this ship up there, and then turn around and come back. And then there were a couple delays. They were a little worried that the Starliner wasn't going to be able to return. And then eventually they called it off entirely. And they had to wait for a crew to come up with SpaceX on a SpaceX Dragon capsule and flip them around. And as a result of this, 2 other astronauts, I don't know if you remember this, they couldn't fly up. Mm-hmm. They had to abandon their seats so that these 2 could have their flight. So it's caused a string of issues along the way. And it's going to cause some issues for a while to go, I would imagine.
Now, when you published your article this morning, I was reading up on some of the details, and something that caught my eye was that they aren't the only ones that have been stuck in space for a long period of time. Talk to us about that.
They're the only ones who've been stuck in space. The other ones chose to be there for long stretches. So there are 10 other astronauts who've been there. What was the other name? There's one name I wrote down. Oh, Frank Rubio is who stayed up there for 371 days. What? So there are 10 astronauts who have been over 200 days. That's pretty amazing. But 371, so he did over a year. Actually, I was at South by, a week and a half ago, and one of the astronauts there was one of the astronauts who'd been there for over 200 days. So it's a small club. There's only a few hundred people who've been to space, period. Mm-hmm. And of that club, only 10 have been up for over 200 days. These 2 now in that club. So pretty cool.
And this is kind of called the elite group, right? A lot of people are calling it that.
Yeah, they're called the elite group because they're the ones who've been there as long as they have. And it's pretty crazy because we just don't send people up for that long. For one, a year in space is a long time. You know, you're away from your family, you're away from your friends, you're away from your life. For two, there's ill effects that can have on you over time, and we're still trying to like figure those out, experiment little stretches, extend people out as long as we can. And we've done some experiments. We're going to talk about those in a little bit.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. I know that some of our topics for this live stream today are the effects that these particular astronauts are going to be facing once they land. What are those effects?
So the first thing you'll notice in the videos later this afternoon is that people, when they come out of, when the two astronauts come out of the capsule, they'll be carried off on stretchers. And that's for a few reasons. And one of the main ones is gravity's back, and they're having to experience gravity. I was listening to Mike Massimino, who's one of my favorite astronauts. He's a great astronaut about talking about being an astronaut. And he says that picking up even a pin after being in microgravity for so long is very challenging. You're just not used to having to use your muscles in that way. You know, they work out in space to maintain muscle mass, but they can only do so much. And so they get back to Earth, and all of a sudden gravity hits. They have this thing called space motion sickness that they experience when they first arrive. And they actually experience that when they get up there, and then when they also come back. So it's this moment, is several days, and I think 60 to 80% of the astronauts experience this, but it's several days of motion sickness, which is just debilitating for several reasons. Here are the symptoms they experience. Pallor, so they get kind of pale, cold sweats, nausea, vomiting, malaise, tired, loss of appetite, fatigue, and anorexia. And this is over several days. And then eventually kind of just goes away as the body readjusts to microgravity or to gravity, depends on which way you're going, I guess. And they're not quite sure on the cause of it. They think there's two possible reasons. The fluids in your body, when you go to microgravity, they shift. So one of the things, you get kind of stuffy in space. You lose the taste, smell kind of goes away.
Kind of like COVID?
Kinda, yeah. The fluids in your body kind of go up into your head. Your face kind of swells up a little bit as a result. And they think that may be causing some of that nausea, that motion sickness. The other thing is, do you play video games at all?
I do.
So sometimes like first-person video games, if you're not controlling them and you're watching somebody else, I don't know about you, but I will get motion sick watching somebody else do it.
But when you're in it, you feel like it's you.
Right. And so they think part of the other reason that it may be happening is kind of that same effect, where their body's not used to kind of the motion they're in, and it's not connecting the dots as easily. And so when they look at things, their body just kind of isn't used to the effects of gravity. They're not used to tilting forward and tilting back and being pulled down a certain direction. And so the senses kind of get thrown for a loop there, which is not super fun.
Well, it looks like they're also suffering from skin sensitivity.
Yes. So astronaut Scott Kelly, him and his brother Mark Kelly, they're twins, and they're astronauts. And they did I'm going to kind of jump a little bit ahead to this twin study they did. They did this twin study way back in, I think it's 2019. I didn't write down a number on these notes, but I think it's 2019. They did this twin study where Scott Kelly went to space for a little more than, or it was almost a year, and then Mark stayed behind on Earth. So you have these identical twins, and you can measure the differences in their bodies over that time. And this is a very kind of vital experiment to see what are the effects of space long term. One of the things Scott reported was when he got back after that long stretch, his feet, he had 340 days. 340-day mission was his length, just shy of a year. His feet had like rashes on them, and they were really sensitive. And it went away over a couple of days, but it's almost like the blood rushed back or something. And there is reports of like skin rashes developing in space as a result of just being in space. There's higher radiation, things like that. But yeah, he experienced it on his feet. So that may be something that they get to look forward to.
More research into why that happens, right?
Right. You'll need more astronauts going into space for long stretches. You get 2 more, just got added to the list, and see if they develop this similar issue.
Great. It's awesome to be a test up there.
I mean, yeah, I would love it. I don't know. You kind of a fun way to experience space is to know you're going to be experimented on when you get back.
Another thing, you mentioned that they do exercise up there just to help with muscle mass and losing all of that. But there's also bone density loss. Why is this? So
the bone density is interesting because you're not putting the pressure on your bones that you do on Earth. Gravity's not putting the pressure. But the cells that clean up old bone cells are still active. So they kind of eat away at themselves. Whereas the stress of gravity allows you to build up. So you lose about 1% of your bone mass per month that you're in space. So these two astronauts have been there 9 months, losing 9% of their bone mass. That's a pretty good chunk of bone mass right there. You'll build it up over time again, but that's pretty substantial, to almost 10%.
Yeah. What does the recovery for that look like?
It's, exercise. It's one of the things that they just come back here and under the gravity, your body will start catching up. There is a long period. And again, there's only 10 astronauts who've been up here for this long period of time. So they're still doing research on what's the impact of that. But yeah, it's 10% of your bone loss. They have a similar thing. People who are in the hospital for long stretches will notice muscle loss, bone loss, stuff like that, because you're just not putting the pressure on those things that you need for them to build up strength.
It's similar to them in space. In the hospital, you're laying in a bed,
right?
Resting, and up there it feels like you're resting because you're not really putting much work into your daily lives.
One of my favorite fun facts about space is you actually grow taller.
Oh.
Because your spine isn't compressed by gravity.
Wow.
So the sacs that go between your spinal cords, on your spinal cord, whatever they're called, your spine, they expand and you get like a couple inches taller. And when you come back, you get to shrink. It's actually one of the reasons I can't go to space. I'm 6'6". I'm already too tall for a spacesuit. And if I got there, I'd be like 6'8", and they don't make 6'8" spacesuits. Maybe in the future, please. But right now they don't. So you do get taller in space. Your back issues go away typically in space because you don't have gravity pushing down on you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish that when you came back, you wouldn't shrink back down to your normal size, because if not, I would go up there and stretch myself out.
Unfortunately, or gravity always comes back to bite us. So that's one of the ways it does it, I guess.
Well, also in space, there is a lot of radiation, and the space station, do they protect you from radiation well enough to not feel effects from that?
It has shielding. So we've talked a little bit in the recent months about how they're doing all these experiments about shielding on different spacecraft to see what can protect electronics and in turn people too, right? So they do have radiation shielding, but the amount of radiation you experience in, I think it's like 1 week's worth is what you get in a year in space. So if you're in space for 1 week, you have a year's worth of radiation that you would typically get on Earth. So there's more radiation. And the International Space Station is also still kind of in our atmosphere. It's in the upper top of our atmosphere. It's in space, but it's not like outer deep space, right? Not like these moon trips we're going to be taking. So they do get a lot of radiation. The risks of that, of course, are cancer. You have a higher risk of cancer when you're exposed to radiation. That's why like X-ray techs wear like the suits and hide behind stuff. When people are getting X-rays, they're exposed to a lot of X-rays over the day. They want to protect themselves, prevent too much exposure, and prevent potential cancer. So that is a risk any astronaut faces. And just because they're up there a longer stretch, they'll kind of monitor that more than they would typically.
Wow. So there's a lot that comes with staying up there for long periods of time, especially when you weren't expecting to.
Right. I mean, both of them have gone up before. My favorite thing about this trip is Butch has grown a beard over the course.
Time.
Have you noticed that? Like the old, like you'll see it in this video here. But he has facial hair, and then sometimes he doesn't, and it's like, yeah, I would do the same thing.
Can you shave your facial hair up there?
You do. They have like a razor with it's like an electric razor, and it has a vacuum attached to it.
Oh,
so it
nice.
Sucks it up.
Wow, I wish we had.
They do haircuts there too. I think they do make those. Like they have but they're not. There's not everywhere. You can have them.
You can buy one, but it's probably gonna take a long
time.
When
I shave once a week, I don't grow facial hair very well. But when I shave once a week, I usually have to clean it up with a vacuum afterwards. Those 4 hairs that fall out.
So their recovery is going to begin as soon as they land today. What is that going to look like for them?
So they'll pull them out. They'll pull them on the stretcher. They'll take them back to NASA. They'll check on them. They usually keep them in isolation for a short period of time, and they get to be released. And they'll have periodic checkups from then on. They'll be exercising, that sort of thing, just to help kind of get their body back to fighting shape, as you were.
How much time do you think that'll take?
I think it depends on the astronaut. So some of the earlier, people only up there a short period of time, it's quite a bit less. So the recovery is going to be quite a bit. Like, so the 10% bone loss, that's pretty substantial. That's going to require some recovery. You typically lose some weight when you're in space. You get taller, you lose weight. It sounds great. I don't know why people are afraid of space travel.
You get taller, you lose weight.
It sounds very nice. I mean, you get to expose yourself to some cool things with no gravity around. So
nice. Well, we do know that they are coming back, but people have to take their place up there.
yeah.
Who are they, and what is their
Just
future
the
looking like?
next Dragon crew, and they're up there for a period of time. Typically you have a rotating crew on the International Space Station. These two were supposed to be short term, so you'll have a rotating crew working their way back through. And the International Space Station is coming down in a couple years. It's older. It's time to move on. And then from there we have the moon in 2 years, please.
2 years.
Next year we're doing the orbit around the moon in deep space, and then after that we're going to go back to the moon, and then comes a colony on the moon. And then comes a thing called Gateway, which is going to be kind of our International Space Station replacement. It's going to be located in orbit around the moon, though, as opposed to orbit around the Earth. And we're going to use that to get to Mars. So we built the International Space Station so we can learn how to live in space. Now we go live on the moon. Then we go live around orbit of the moon. And then we go live in Mars. So it's step by step. The International Space Station, only a couple years left, sadly.
Now, going to the moon and learning how to live on the moon, is that just our astronauts, or is it worldwide astronauts?
So the good thing about these programs, Artemis, for instance, has the first crew that's going to orbit, Artemis 2, has a Canadian astronaut on board. European Space Agency's involved, but the other space agencies are all trying to get there too. So it is another moon race, another space race happening now. NASA's leading the charge this one, but we are working in tandem with Canadian Space Agency and European Space Agency and the others around the world. And there's several different ones. But I think we want to get there first.
Yeah, but it takes a group effort, right?
It takes a group effort. The pilot, I'm going to quote a guy who I actually haven't met, but I heard another guy quote him. So this is a secondhand quote. The pilot of Artemis 2, Victor Glover, said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And so that was his mentality. That's his mentality with Artemis 2, the mission taking us in orbit of the moon. First time we've been in orbit of the moon since the 70s. So that's pretty wild.
That's wild. I would not go alone, even if I wanted to go fast.
Crew of 4 there. I mean, it's true, though. Yeah, I do that. Sometimes when I'm trying to get stuff done quick at work, I just buckle down and do it by myself. But if I have a bunch of work to do, it's a group effort. We got a couple big projects coming up that have all been group efforts. Some things I'm just trying to get them done that day, and it's just me by myself. So it just kind of depends what we're doing.
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Depends on the project.
Depends on the day, depends on the project. Going to the moon, that's a big project. That requires a lot of people.
So these astronauts are literally splashing down this afternoon off the coast of Florida, right?
Yeah, but 4:57 Central Time, 5:57 Eastern Time. So if you're watching in Central Texas, 4:57, we'll be having an eye on it on KXAN.
We'll have a live stream?
I don't know if we'll have a live stream, but it'll be on. We have a TV show on right then, so catch that. I'm sure they're gonna they'll put it up then. I'm sure they will if it's happening.
Do you think NASA will be live streaming that?
They are 100% live streaming that. We actually have a link to their live stream in our story on KXAN.com.
I'm glad you brought up the story because I really want to bring it up as well and show everyone. The story is titled "Stranded Astronauts Return Home but Face Recovery from Extended Space Day," and we have photos of those astronauts. All the information we talked about. What is something that we didn't get to touch on?
I think we touched on just about everything. It's so exciting to have them return and then to hear their experience. And then, of course, like we talked about, they're going to become science experiments themselves because they're going to collect a lot of data on their time in space. Anytime you send anyone to space, you collect data on them, and they're going to collect a lot of data on these two because they were up there so long, 9 months.
Yeah, this is what they look like when they went up.
That was day one. Yeah. I think the photo at the top is this week.
He did grow a beard.
Yeah, he did. He's they're definitely like
this one.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, he's I don't blame him. I would do the same thing. Mine doesn't grow very fast, but after 9 months, I think I'd have like at least a quarter of a mustache. So. There you go. Quarter of a mustache. It's not much. So.
They spent a lot of holidays up there, right?
Yeah, and they do. We talked about that around Christmas time, I believe, that what they do during the holidays. And they have a lot of different celebrations they do, which is pretty fun. I
think they were there for Thanksgiving, Christmas,
Christmas, New Year's, President's Day.
Valentine's Day. St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day. Well, they'd missed St. Patrick's Day by a hair, didn't they?
Well, thank you so much for sharing this journey these astronauts have been on. You've been covering it from the start and throughout the entire process. And as much as it was a long journey for them, us down here watching them, it was interesting to see how they're going through that timeline.
I remember you and I were talking last year, and I was like, it'll be a couple months. It won't be.
was
It
more than
won't
a
be
couple
March.
months.
It couldn't possibly be March when they come back.
I think I remember us saying that they were going to come back sometime in October.
It was October, then it got pushed to January, then it got pushed to February.
Now March.
Now they're on their way. We
They're
know it's
on
going to
their
be
way.
today.
Finally.
It depends on the time, but it will be today.
Yes, hopefully they land safely and everything goes well. And the astronauts that took their space or their place in space are doing well as well.
I think they're going to love it up there. I hear good things.
Yep. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to see what topic you have for us next week.
Yeah, me too. Ooh, there's some twists and turns. I'll let you know.
Ooh, excited. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here on KXAN Live again. We do have our streaming app on any platform you get your streams from, either Roku TV, Fire Stick, Apple TV. It's called KXAN Plus. Download it in the App Store and you can catch us there or here. Thank you so much.